ULB Podcast. Les podcasts de l'Université libre de Bruxelles.
Talking with you.
The student's point of view.
We are here to talk.
We are here to ask.
We are here to learn.
Welcome to our new episode of Talking with You, the podcast where the student point of view matters. This show wants to provide the students an open and safe space to discuss the topics that we deal with the students, but also in a broader sense, the ones that concern us the most as passionate young individuals. Hello everyone, my name is Felix.
And my name is Cora, and we will be hosting this episode today. Well, what can you say about our topic today other than use your vote? Then, in less than 3 weeks, we will vote for a new European Parliament at the European Parliament election from 6th to 9th of June. More than 400 million people are eligible to vote, meaning that the EU elections are the second largest elections in the world. Even though we have already touched on this election in our big 2024 election episode, this time we want to dive deep into the way we, as Europeans, vote for the EU level.
And that's why we are very excited to dedicate this month's episode only to talking about the European Parliament elections in 2024, as we consider these elections hugely important for our common European future, and we want to show you also why you should too. But before we start, as always, let me introduce our two guests of today. Carmen Noviello, President of Eyes on Europe and European Students Master Student.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
And Ludovica Colosimo, Member of SciS and also European Studies Master Student at the IEE.
Hi everyone.
Cheers for making it today.
I agree. Great that you took the time to be with us today. But let's get started. First, a small recap. The last European Parliament election took place in 2019 with both the centre-right European People's Party, EPP, as well as the centre-left Party of European Socialists, PES, as main contender to succeed Jean-Claude Juncker, the former EPP Commission President, who announced to not run again for the job for the 2019 elections. While the EPP with its lead or Spitzenkandidat Manfred Weber won the majority of votes, and the PES with its candidate Franz Timmermans finished second, none of the two could convince all heads of state and governments who sit in the European Council and who have the final say when it comes to deciding on who's going to become next Commission President. After days of stalemate, Ursula von der Leyen, then German Minister of Defense, who did not campaign at all in the elections, was conjured out of a hat, we will come back to that later, and achieved unanimity in the European Council. After the European Parliament approved her, she governed as European Commission President backed by a centrist coalition of EPP, SNDs, and the Liberal Renew Europe group in the European Parliament until today. A lot has happened in the last 5 years. But before we go into the nitty-gritty of politics, we would like to hear from you quickly. Are you going to vote in this year's European Parliament election? And if yes or no, why? Or why not?
Yeah, of course I will. I actually did all the boring and long procedure to vote for Italian candidates from Belgium. So I actually put a lot of efforts in it. And why? Yeah, maybe it might seem obvious, but of course it is important. I mean, sometimes I have the feeling that people really do not understand the impact that the EU has in our everyday life. I mean, some of our public transports are financed through EU funds. The EU also decides on our phone charges with its directives. So implicit, not so implicit advertisement, use of vote from 6 to 9 June and make your voice matter.
And what about you, Ludovica?
Me too, of course, I'm going to vote. And since I'll be in Brussels, I asked the documents to the embassy, so I'll be able to vote even I'm not coming back to my home country. And as a student of the Master in European Studies, the elections were the main topic of the whole year, so everybody's really excited for them. And apart from this, I think that voting is fundamental, especially young people have the responsibility to elect their representative for the next 5 years, and Europe has many challenges to face, so I think that abstention is not the right way to make some changes.
I couldn't agree more. Voting is incredibly important. It's the primary way for us to influence the direction of the European Union and ensure that our voices are heard. By voting, we contribute to shaping policies that affect everything from climate action and economic policies to education and digital rights. It's not just a civic duty, but also a powerful tool to hold our representatives accountable and push for changes we want to see. Ignoring this opportunity means giving up our say in how our society is governed and who makes those crucial decisions on our behalf.
I couldn't agree more. So go out and use your vote in any case. We still have to return now to EU politics. As previously mentioned already by you, Cora, after the 2019 elections, the heads of governments and states in the European Council, they basically just hijacked this Spitzenkandidaten principle. Like they picked Ursula von der Leyen as candidate for the European Commission President. She never campaigned. And while she was not running in 2019, as I mentioned, this time DPP officially nominated von der Leyen as their lead candidate for the European Commission President for this year's election. And the SND also nominated Nicolas Schmidt, current Commissioner of Jobs and Social Rights, as their lead candidate. Particularly, I would say von der Leyen as lead candidate for the EPP has good chances of being re-elected, of course not guaranteed, but the EPP is leading the polls with a 25 to 30 seats margin, followed by the SND in the last political poll of polls from May to the European Parliament elections in 2024. But as I said, nothing is sure, as the Spitzenkandidat principle, as last time, against the promises made after the 2019 election, was in no way legally enshrined in the last 5 years, meaning also that for this election, in the end, member states will have the last say. So here I'm already coming to my first question. Are we heading into another election as a potential wildcard, where there's again no guarantee that the winner of the election will become the president of the Commission, something which is very normal when we look at national parliamentary elections in different member states, for example? So what's your opinion on the Spitzenkandidaten principle in general? And also in your view, what message would send another campaign where those lead candidates are posted and also promoted all around Europe, and in the end, none of them would become the president of the Commission after the election? Maybe let's start with you, Ludovica.
Personally, I think that the idea behind the Spitzenkandidaten procedure was to increase the democratic legitimacy and to bring a technocratic institution such as the Commission closer to the citizen. The fact of giving a face that you can easily reconduct as the prime candidate of a party, of course, is a way to increase citizens' interest in the elections. But I think that now it has become a procedure full of contradictions and that undermines the transparency of the Commission. So I don't know, I'm asking myself if the electors still believe in this procedure, if it's still credible. And of course, the message that will pass if none of the candidates will become Commission's president in the end will be that there are no rules and the electors would probably feel betrayed. So I hope that the procedure, that it's ideally an interesting procedure, will be respected.
Carmen, what's your take on that?
I actually do believe in the principle of the Spitzenkandidat, and I think that it makes the selection of the European Commission president more transparent and less concerted behind the scenes, as it usually happens actually at the European level. But as you were saying, Ludovica, it also reduces the distance between the citizens and the European institutions. I mean, it allows citizens, even within a broader mechanism that also includes the European Council, because we cannot forget that it is the European Council which actually has the final say on the candidate, but it allows citizens to participate to the selection of the president of one of probably the most important institutions at the European level, which has a strong impact in our everyday life, which is technocratic. But let me say, I don't think that you will kill me if I say it's not so technocratic anymore. I mean, in the last years, the European Commission has become more and more political. Then the level of knowledge and understanding of European citizens on the Spitzenkandidaten is a completely different topic that probably deserves an entire episode. But then to come to your second question, you actually said that polls place Ursula von der Leyen as one of the possible winner. I mean, I'm not so sure about Ursula, because I don't know if you had the possibility to watch the Maastricht debate, which is actually the debate between the possible candidates proposed by the different political groups. I watched it, and even if at the end of the day Ursula von der Leyen was actually one of the most favored candidates, he was strongly attacked by her opponents, which you would probably say, yeah, of course she's an easy target because she's the actual president of the European Commission. But the point is that she was strongly attacked for the European Green Deal, which is still a divisive and contentious topic also at the national level. So, and I come to your question, what would be the message if none of them becomes president? I mean, it depends on where the process stops. If the European Council doesn't agree on the candidate who wins the elections, it would be a sign of mistrust, or at least weak connection between the European Parliament and the EU Council. Then if the EU Council cannot even agree on a common candidate, it would be a sign of division between member states. So in any case, it would be a symptom of weak Europe. And if you want my prediction, I think that none of them will be selected, but then we'll see and we'll talk about it in the next episode.
I agree, Carmen. It's not set in stone that Ursula von der Leyen has become the next president of the European Commission, but as you both mentioned, also when it comes to the Spitzenkandidaten principle, is that it actually made the way we choose our political leadership in Europe much more transparent, which I would also agree to. And also to the fact, if there's again the situation that we have those two candidates which we have now, none of them becomes the president of the Commission, it would of course also be enhancing this lack of link between the EU citizenship and also the leadership in the end. But we have to see what's going to happen after the elections.
What is also visible when looking at the previously mentioned polling from Politico is that the European Greens are in danger to lose more than 30 seats, while the right-wing National Conservative, European Conservatives and reformist groups, as well as the extreme right Identity and Democracy, are the only two factions on track to gain new seats, potentially leading to a shift in the European parliaments toward the right, as it has happened in many EU member states in recent elections. The 2019 European Parliament elections were characterized by high citizen demand for climate action and a surge of votes for green parties and policies, leading to major climate initiatives such as the European Green Deal and other important climate laws. In contrast, today, this year's elections seem to be dominated by containing the rise of parties on the right and extreme right and EU citizens' desire for more conservative policy. So, getting to the next question, what is your explanation for this big and observable shift in public attitude all across Europe, and how can we encounter the rise of right-wing populists and the far right?
I mean, if you're asking me why there's been a shift towards right positions, I don't think I'm able to find an explanation, especially after the attack against the Slovakian Prime Minister yesterday, which has been interpreted as a sign of crisis for the European elections. But then, if you're asking me about the shift of citizens' demands from more climate intervention to more conservative position, I just have one answer. They probably just got scared. I mean, they felt it as an emergency in 2019 and they asked for more climate action. They actually got the European Green Deal, but it was not managed in a fair and social way. So they saw the costs of this transition and just said, you know what, it goes too fast, we cannot follow it anymore. So my needs come first. But this is just my personal non-expert vision on the topic. Then in more general terms, there is also, I think, a lack of political alternative on the left. I actually read an interesting book about it, which I strongly suggest to our listeners, which is La scomparsa della sinistra in Europa, the disappearance of the left in Europe, which says that the left actually flattened on more moderate positions to appeal to a broader electoral base, and in doing it, it actually diluted its identity. I think that the left should have used the advance of the right parties as a political opportunity also to restructure itself, to propose itself as a political alternative, which I think is not happening right now.
Okay, Ludovica?
I totally agree with you, Carmen. I think that the crisis that the European Union had to face during this year had an enormous impact on increasing the citizens' fear and anxiety towards the future of Europe. One of the main claims in the European political scenario, especially raised by the far-right parties now, is the request for a new EU defense strategy, symptom that Europeans don't feel safe. I think that generally this sentiment is understandable due to the instability of these years, but at the same time the situation is really, really sensitive because it feels that far-right parties are constantly seeking for an enemy, shifting their attention only to this instead of taking into account also the other numerous objectives of the EU's agenda.
Thank you, Carmen, and thank you, Ludovica, for your answers. It is, of course, clear that the political landscape in Europe is undergoing significant changes, reflecting broader shifts in public sentiment. And so, of course, addressing these changes requires understanding the underlying causes. To counter the rise of right-wing populism and far-right ideologies, it's crucial for mainstream parties and policymakers to engage with citizen concern more effectively, offering solutions to issues like immigration, economic disparity, and national sovereignty. Also, ensuring that citizens feel heard and represented is key to maintaining a stable and inclusive European Union.
I want to point out one thing you said, which I also strongly agree, Cora, is the point of representing citizens. Because when we also look at the elections in general, like I know a lot of things are moving right now, but in the bigger picture, these elections in the European Union are also often criticized not only because of the Spitzenkandidaten principle, but also in general for its lack of democratic accountability. So we already have covered the failed Spitzenkandidaten principle in 2019, for example, but we also have the fact that, for example, we have those lead candidates, but they're not on the ballot in every member state. So basically, they're just in their home member state, but in other member states, people are just voting for different people and not for an EU-wide candidate. And also we have the fact that European parties in general, they are not very a strong structure. You can't compare them to national parties. We don't even have EU-wide electoral rules for the whole European Parliament elections in general. So when we also not only look at the Spitzenkandidaten principle, but also to other factors I just mentioned, what does it take, in your opinion, to make the EU more democratic, more representative, and more accessible to citizens? Or is this often attested democratic deficit of the EU just a myth? Let's start with you, Ludwika. What do you think about that?
I don't think that the democratic deficit is just a myth. I think it's existent, and an attempt that was made from the European Union to increase the democratic legitimacy was, for example, the Conference of the Future of Europe. Of course, it can be considered as an experiment still. I think it was a good attempt to increase the democracy inside the institutions and to feel the citizens closer and involved into them.
Yeah, I think that the example on the Conference of the Future of Europe is certainly most appropriate. And of course, then we will have to see if the European institutions actually decide to transform these proposals that were made by the citizens and the European panels and the national panels in actual recommendations.
And Carmen, what do you think about that? Is this whole democratic deficit something made up, or is it really a problem the EU is facing?
Unfortunately, it is not. I mean, this is why we talk about second-order elections. And I think that it happens because there is still a strong distance between the European level and the national level. But I think that the question is not how to make Europe more democratic, but actually how to make the European Union more European. And actually the Spitzenkandidatin goes in this direction. Then another option would be, for instance, transnational lists, which means that I do not vote just for Italian candidates, but for transnational candidates. Then I think that the most serious problem is actually the persistent national features that we have when it comes to deal with European topics. Because I think that now more than ever, there are actually a lot of European topics on the table. I mean, defense, security, climate change are some examples of European topics that should be tackled, that we should tackle as Europeans, but they're still approached just through national lenses. Then, to be honest, I still have hope. I think that the Europeanization process has started and it will actually lead to
positive outcome, Carmen, is something I want to continue on, elaborate a bit on it, because that's what we're all hoping for after these elections. But to have like a positive outcome of this election, we have to vote. And I mean, what this episode also showed is that we have the luxury as well to criticize even our elections, our democracy. In a way, we can talk about it freely. And I think it's something we should appreciate. And there's so many important issues going on, and that's why everyone should go to vote. It's from the 6th to 9th of June, the European Parliament elections. And if you want to find out how and where you can vote, then go to elections.europa.eu, and you can find out even for your own member state, but also for when you're abroad. It's going to show you everything where you can vote. So use your vote in the next election.
Okay, so I would also like to urge all of you to participate, of course, and of course remember that by casting your vote, you help decide the future of the European Union, which impacts not only our present, but also the generations to come. So mark your calendars for June 6 to 9 and make sure to vote. Before the end, we would like to express a very special thanks to our two guests, Carmen and Ludovica, for joining us today to discuss this very interesting but challenging topic. I also want to thank you all for listening to one more episode of Talking with EU, the student's point of view. Until next time.
This podcast was sponsored by the Institut d'études européennes of the Université Libre de Bruxelles, which we thank for the opportunity of this space.